queens here for Dan Shak. Ladies and gentlemen, perfect scenario for Shak potentially here as he looks to chip up a little bit. Question is, does Little have something to play with here? 10-9 off. Okay, I can see Little defending here. 10-9 off is not a terrible hand. We've reached the stage during which every hand could be decisive for the outcome of this tournament.
I'm at the final table of a $10,000 buy-in PokerGO Cup tournament. Spoiler alert, I won it. There's the trophy right down there. In this hand, Dan Shak is the short stack with 20 big blinds in the small blind. Alex Foxen folds the button. It's up to Dan Shak. He raises to $325,000 at 75-150, which in my mind makes alarm bells go off like crazy. Mr. Editor, go rewind. Look at my face when he made it 325. Sometimes I can't control myself. So, in this hand, Dan Shak raises small, and alarm bells are going off in my head like crazy. Question then becomes, can I fold the 10-9 offsuit? Well, I'm getting amazing pot odds. I have to put in, what, 175 to try to win a pot of, how much? 800. Those are amazing pot odds. Even if I think Dan Shak's range is strong, I'll probably realize more than 25% equity in this pot, especially since I am the big stack in the hand and I'm in position and 10-9 is okay. Also, my read that Dan Shak is super strong could just be wrong. It wasn't, but it could be, right? So I'm going to call, I'm going to proceed cautiously, and we'll see how this develops.
Stacks running very close together. The blinds are huge. We have not reached this level yet, Donnie. 75K 150 is usually where it all ends.
250.
Yeah, it could be a little troublesome here on this flop for Little. Flops top pair with that gutter. Shak comes out betting 250,000.
If you're Little here, Donnie, little incentive to raise. Maybe you just want to come along.
I think you can just call here and kind of see how this board progresses.
The flop comes 9 of clubs, 8 of hearts, 6 of spades. Dan Shak goes for a third pot bet. I think in this situation, he'd probably be a little bit better off checking because this flop should be really good for my pre-flop calling range. I'm going to bet this flop pretty frequently because I'm going to have some sort of pair or straight draw a lot of the time. And then Dan Shak can put in a raise and shut me out with a lot of hands that have pretty good equity against his queens. But whatever, he goes for a third pot bet. Now, normally in my shoes, I think raising and just getting the money in immediately is going to be the right play, assuming I think Dan Shak's preflop range is normal. Because the 9's almost always good, but it's very vulnerable to being outdrawn by any random overcards. However, I just have really good equity even when I am behind, right? Even if I am against a hand like pocket queens, you can see right here, I have 32% equity, so it's not like it's terrible. So I think raising and getting in normally is going to be the right play. However, if I think Dan Shak's range is going to be a whole lot stronger than normal, his range will be heavily tilted towards overpairs. How do I do against overpairs? Well, I know I'm not crushing overpairs, and I know he's not folding overpairs. So I'm going to play this spot cautiously. I call. Let's head to the turn.
There it is.
Jonathan Little drills it on the turn, makes a straight. Dan Shak in a world of trouble here.
Yeah, I think Shak, you know, ultimately might not go broke here. I mean, that's a scary board out there. 4 to a straight, right? So a lot of possibilities for Little to have Shak.
The turn is the 7 of hearts. I make the straight. Dan Shak with 0% equity. Checks. And I had to figure out if I should bet or check. Now, logically, I certainly want to bet and put money in the pot because I have the best hand. And, well, the pot's not big enough to the point that I can shove all in on a lot of rivers. Notice the pot's 1.3 million and Dan Shak has 2.3 behind. So I'd love to get some money in this pot. The problem, though, is that I don't think Dan Shak's the type of player to call a turn bet with a hand like queens and then call a shove on the river. So I don't think I'm getting paid off for a turn plus river shove from overpairs. What about when he has nothing, though? What about when he has merely ace-king, ace-queen, ace-jack? Well, those are not going to put any more money in the pot, and I really want them to improve to top pair. So if my preflop read was accurate, the Dan Shak's range should be good, strong, high cards and good pairs. I don't think it makes sense to bet the turn because I'm going to get one bet out of the overpairs, and I'm only going to get one bet out of the overcards if he spikes a pair or decides to bluff. So normally if I thought he had a much more natural range that would contain pairs, flush draws, bad end of the straight, etc., I would just want to bet. But in this scenario, I think checking back is the right play because that's going to result in me getting in the most money, especially from his unpaired high cards.
You know, he can have plenty of 5s. He can have plenty of 10s.
Oh my God, are you joking? Dan Shak drills a queen on the river to make trips. Of course, 4 to a straight out there now, also a third heart, so, you know, not 100% comfortable.
500.
But if this goes to showdown, Dan Shak will be crushed.
The river is a disaster for Dan Shak, the queen of hearts. After some thought, he goes for a 500,000 bet, about 28-ish%, I think. And I think this is reasonable. He does have to be very careful on this river because I could easily be sitting here with a flush or a straight. But given it went check-check on the turn, he's probably going to remove a lot of flush draws and straights from my range, which means he probably has the best hand. So he goes for the 500,000 bet. And I have to figure out what I should do in this scenario. Should I call or raise, not all in, or should I rip it in? And I want you to take a second and think about this spot and let me know what you would do down there in the comment section. While you're down there, if you're enjoying this video, click the like and subscribe button, click the notification bell. It costs you nothing and it helps me. Thank you.
Oh, the frown might indicate Little just making the call here, perhaps?
Okay, just call.
Oh, he does just make the call.
Yes.
Wow. Why didn't you raise the flop so I could jam? Yeah, you're calling anyway. Wow.
JonLittle rakes in a
I'm
nice
not-
little
if I
profit
check
here.
the river, I'm gonna call anyway, and
You losing? You would have lost more if you checked.
probably, yeah. I thought you had 2 pair on
Could have.
the locker.
Certainly could have.
Dan Shak's bet was very nicely sized in this spot because if he bet smaller, I think we have to raise. And if he bet bigger, I would never raise. Because even though I have a straight in this scenario, you have to realize Dan Shak is a tricky, trappy player. He could be sitting here with the Jack 10, or way more likely, a flush. And if he has a flush and I raise, he's going to call me every time. And if he has Jack 10, he's going to call me every time. And if he has a 10, he's not going to fold. He's going to call me every time. So the question then becomes, what does he do with a 5, which I don't think he has many of, and what does he do with over pairs / sets? I think in this spot, if I put in any raise at all, he's going to fold out hands worse than a straight. Dan Shak is not the type of player who's going to think I, Jonathan Little, who I think most people think are somewhat in line, if he thinks I'm mostly in line, which I'm not, but if he thinks I'm mostly in line, then he's just not going to pay me off. So if he's just not going to pay me off with hands worse than a straight, I'm really only trying to get value from a 5. And I already told you multiple times, for multiple reasons, I don't think he has a whole lot of 5s in his range. So the question becomes, should I still raise and just hope he finds a hero call with a set? And I don't think so. I think it is somewhat likely he's sitting here with a flush. Not Jack 10 very often, but I do think a flush is somewhat likely. So after much deliberation, I just called. And this may look nitty. This may look like I'm leaving value on the table, but I'm pretty sure I'm not. And I think raising would actually be a decent error against a player like Dan Shak in this spot. That's it for today. If you enjoyed this video, again, click like and subscribe. I'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye.